Why is it every time that Sadiq Khan opens his mouth, it makes a greater point of why do we need a mayor of London? Because he seems to be so dictatorial that he wants all the powers, and it's just another reason why he shouldn't have all these powers. So recently he said that basically he wants to implement rent controls in London. Personally, I think it's, what's the point of rent controls when we don't have good supply? We're not building enough houses, and the demand as well is increasing because of the influx of people, because of immigration policies. Darren, what do you think about this?
Well, absolutely, Jess. I mean, the stats from last year are quite astonishing. 500,000 people net came here last year. So, of course, we're going to have housing struggles and all the rest of it, especially in the capital city. I mean, Sadiq Khan is actually after power and control. He wants to have more powers handed to him, devolved to him, so he can create a London as this hard left wing citadel. The ULEZ scheme, for example, are causing much heartache and misery for many drivers. You've had people taking the law into their own hands, Jess, and covering the cameras that Sadiq Khan's installing. I mean, why do you need cameras if you're not going to actually enforce and build upon these laws? It's a cash scheme for Sadiq Khan and London authorities. I think it's a really outrageous cash scheme as well, because it impacts the poorest in London the hardest. That's your white van man or woman and all the rest of it. Don't cancel me. And now he's saying, Jess, let's bring in rent controls. I mean, that would do more damage to London, Jess, than the Blitz, right? If he introduced rent controls. Now, I know that'll be offensive to some people because of the sheer scale of the psychological horror that the Blitz inflicted upon people. But the lack of housing caused by the Blitz, I actually think rent controls would cause the same issues, because history of rather is littered with examples of rent controls not working. Throughout my time, Dr. Christian Niemitz at the Institute of Economic Affairs, who I know you're a big fan of, Jess, he could wax lyrical until the cows come home about example after example throughout the world of rent controls not working. Look at Berlin, look at Dublin. These things do not work. They exacerbate the housing crisis. And I'll tell you why that is. Because we have this image, I think, in our heads of wealthy landlords sort of creaming millions off of the top of desperate Londoners to make vast sums of money from being landlords and in rents, extortionate rents. Now, the reason rents in London are so high is because, as you say, the immigration levels at record highs. Of course, that's a factor. There's also the factor that we're simply not building any houses, enough houses. And we'll have a supply and demand issue where there is a hell of a lot of demand, but not enough supply. Now, what rent controls would actually do, Jess, is ensure that the marginal landlords, now what I mean by the marginal landlord is, imagine you bought a flat in London under Margaret Thatcher's right to buy. It was an ex-council house, and you bought that in the 1980s. Suddenly it's worth, a couple of million quid maybe in some parts of London. Insane inflationary numbers. And are now renting that out. Now, there's only so much that you can actually raise rents before people say, I simply cannot afford to pay that and have to leave London altogether. That's happening. That's taking place today. But there's also the factor of you cannot not raise rents in London because you're not making enough to pay the mortgage, for example. You're not making enough to pay for repayments on, doing up the flat or something like that. Now, the marginal landlord says, well, I simply can't afford to keep this on anymore. So they put the house up for sale. Well, guess what, Jess? Not a lot of people can afford to buy houses in London because you need one hell of a deposit to actually put down on a £1 million flat. So, 10% of 1 million being 100,000 quid. Not a lot of people have got 100,000 quid in cash lying about. So that would mean that, one, there would be far fewer landlords in London, which we actually need. We shouldn't demonise these people. They're not making vast sums of money, many of them. It's marginal at best. And actually, I would argue that they're heroes, frankly, who are doing this. And we should encourage this kind of private enterprise and property rights, frankly, and not seek to demonize and demean these people. But also it would mean that there would be fewer people that are able to live in London. So you'd have fewer people to work in key industries like the NHS, for example. It is, I can't put this strongly enough. It is insane. It would damage London beyond belief. Sadiq Khan is a dangerous idiot that wants powers just to look good, to say, look at me, beat his chest, this pumped up parliamentary, he's not even parliamentary, Jess. He's a pumped up pygmy in a local authority trying to get more powers to frankly ruin what is one of the greatest capital cities, if not the in the world. He is ruining London, and he would destroy London if he managed to get the powers to bring in rent controls. Dangerous little idiot.
Great.
Have you got what it takes to be a reasoned presenter? Well, send us a short clip of yourself to join@reasoned.uk, and we might be seeing you on this very channel very soon indeed.